Have you ever believed you knew the very soul of a person, the intricate map of their heart, only to discover one day that a complete stranger was wearing their face? Have you ever loved someone so completely that your love became a quiet, constant hum in the background of their life, a sound so familiar they forgot to listen for it anymore? I thought I knew my husband, Mark. After 12 years, I believed our love was a fortress, built brick by brick with shared memories and quiet sacrifices. I was the steady one, the planner, the one who remembered anniversaries and the way he liked his coffee. He was the dreamer, the charismatic force who charmed rooms and chased ambitions I quietly helped fund. His annual cabin trip with his college friends was a sacred ritual, a boisterous weekend of masculine energy I never intruded upon. But this year was different. A loneliness had crept into our home, a silence that felt heavier than peace. I missed the easy laughter, the spark in his eye when he looked at me. I decided a grand gesture was in order. A surprise. A jolt to the system to remind us both of the spontaneous, passionate people we once were. So I planned it with the same meticulous care I applied to everything in our life. I baked his favorite lemon poppy seed muffins, their scent filling the kitchen like a sweet promise. I found the exact vintage of a Cabernet Sauvignon we'd shared on our honeymoon in a dusty little wine shop, the label a bit faded, just like the photograph from that trip on our mantelpiece. The Tower Drive north was a journey back in time. With each mile that passed, the city skyline shrinking in my rearview mirror, I felt the weight of routine lift. I imagined his face, the initial shock melting into that wide, boyish grin that had first captured my heart. I saw him pulling me into a hug, the scent of pine and wood smoke in his clothes, his friends cheering our storybook romance. It was a foolishly perfect fantasy, but it warmed me against the growing chill outside. I was Clara, the loving wife, on my way to deliver a perfect surprise. I was about to remind my husband how much he was loved. I had no idea that in a few short hours, it would be me who received the reminder, a lesson so brutal and so clear it would change the very course of my life forever. I had no idea I was driving toward a closed door through which I would hear the truth of my entire marriage. The final stretch of road was unpaved, a winding dirt track cutting through a forest of dense, silent pine trees. A light snow had begun to fall, dusting the world in a soft, ethereal white. It was beautiful, but the isolation was palpable. The cabin, when it finally came into view, was exactly as Mark had described it, a rustic log structure with a wide porch and a single plume of gray smoke curling from its stone chimney. A warm, golden light spilled from its windows, a beacon of cheer in the vast, darkening wilderness. I parked my little sedan down the road, tucked behind a thicket of birch trees so it wouldn't be seen. The crunch of my boots on the fresh snow was the only sound as I made my way toward that welcoming glow, the box of muffins in one arm and the precious bottle of wine clutched in the other. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs, a rhythm of pure, unadulterated anticipation. This was it. This was the moment. I crept up the wooden steps of the porch, my movements as stealthy as a teenager's. From inside, I could hear a sudden eruption of laughter, loud and unrestrained. It was the sound of men untethered from their daily lives, and I smiled. This was their sanctuary, and I was about to crash it in the most wonderful way. I peered through a small gap in the drawn curtains, but the angle was wrong. I could only make out shifting shadows, the silhouette of a raised bottle, the gesticulation of an arm telling a story. It all felt so normal, so right. I took a deep, steadying breath, the frigid air stinging my lungs. I shifted the box of muffins in my arm, raised my free hand, and prepared to knock on the heavy oak door. My knuckles were inches away from the wood when I heard my own name cut through the boisterous noise, and the sound of it made my hand freeze in midair. It was a simple question, but the tone was laced with something I couldn't quite place, a cynical edge that didn't belong in a place of friendship and camaraderie. So, Mark, the voice slurred slightly, a voice I recognized as his friend David's, the perennial skeptic of the group. When are you finally going to tell Clara about the promotion? A silence followed, a brief lull in the storm of laughter. Then came my husband's voice, not the warm, loving tone I cherished, but one that was lazy, dismissive, and utterly devoid of affection. What's there to tell? Mark said, and I could almost picture him shrugging, a gesture of casual indifference he had perfected over the years. The job is in the city, a full relocation. She'd never go. You know Clara. She's too attached to her little garden and her book club meetings. My breath hitched. A little garden? A book club? He made my life, the world I had carefully cultivated for us, sound like a trivial hobby, a childish attachment. The words were a small, sharp sting, but it was what came next that began to turn the snow around me into a frozen desert. David chuckled, a low, prodding sound. Come on, man. It's not just the promotion, is it? It's the whole package. A new life. A clean slate. What did that mean? A clean slate from what? From me? The chill on the porch began to seep past my coat, past my skin, deep into my bones. I forgot all about the surprise, the muffins, the wine. Instinct took over. I pressed my ear against the cold, rough wood of the door, desperate and terrified to hear more. I needed to understand the shape of this stranger who was speaking with my husband's voice. I didn't have to wait long. Mark let out a short, hollow laugh. It wasn't a sound of joy. It was a sound of concession, of bitter truth. Look, he began, his voice dropping into a conspiratorial tone. Clara is comfortable. He said the word like it was a disease. She's predictable. She's reliable. You know? She's like a good pair of old shoes. You don't get excited about putting them on anymore, but they're broken in. They do the job, an old pair of shoes. The metaphor struck me with the force of a physical blow. I swayed on my feet, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a gasp. 12 years of love, of partnership, of holding him up when his dreams faltered, and this was my value. Utility. Comfort. The worn-out familiarity of an old possession. I heard David and another friend laugh, a chorus of validation for his cruelty. But David, like a vulture, wasn't done picking at the carcass of my dignity. And what about the money? He pressed. The inheritance from her grandmother. The one she gave you to get the company off the ground. That wasn't exactly comfortable, was it? That was a serious risk. A deep, profound silence fell over the room. I held my breath, my ear aching from the pressure against the door. This was the moment. This was where he would defend me. Defend us. Surely, he would tell them how my belief in him, expressed through that life-changing sum of money, was the foundation of his success. Surely, he would honor that sacrifice. His voice, when it came, was colder than the winter night. She offered, he stated, as if it were a legal defense. And, honestly, it was the smart play. For me. She doesn't have a head for business. She would have just, I don't know, frittered it away on renovations or a trip. I put it to work. I built something. She doesn't understand that world. The floor of the porch seemed to dissolve beneath my feet. He hadn't just dismissed my love, he had rewritten my history. He painted my act of faith as ignorance, my sacrifice as frivolity. The money had come from my grandmother, a woman who believed in me, who had told me to use it to build a life of my own choosing. And I had chosen to build it with him. In that moment, I understood. He didn't see me as a partner. He saw me as a resource. A well-meaning, simple-minded resource to be exploited. Just as the crushing weight of his betrayal threatened to shatter me completely, to send me running into the woods with a scream trapped in my throat, another voice cut through the toxic air. It was Leo. Quiet, observant Leo, the one who always seemed to be watching from the periphery, the one Mark once described as being too serious for his own good. His voice was different from the others. It was sober. It was clear. And it was angry. That's not right, Mark, Leo said, the words slicing cleanly through the thick, boozy atmosphere. That is a horrible thing to say. The laughter died instantly. A tense, heavy silence descended upon the room inside. I could feel it through the door, a palpable shift in energy. Oh, here we go, David scoffed, trying to break the tension. Saint Leo, defender of the realm, but Leo was undeterred. His voice grew stronger, imbued with a conviction that resonated deep within my frozen heart. You know it's not right, he continued, speaking directly to Mark. That's not what you told her when she gave you that money. I was there, remember? You told her she was your rock. You told her this was for us, that she was your silent partner, The reason you could even dare to dream. You didn't talk about her like she was a fool then. I pressed my forehead against the wood. Tears I hadn't realized I was crying now freezing in icy tracks down my cheeks. Someone else had heard it. Someone else remembered. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't just a comfortable old shoe. And calling her predictable? Leo's voice was laced with a quiet fury that was more terrifying than any shouting. She's not predictable, Mark. She's constant. There's a difference. She's the one who remembered your mother's birthday when you forgot. She's the one who stayed up with you for 3 nights straight when you were terrified your company would fail. You talk about her like she's an appliance you've grown tired of, but she's the entire power grid that keeps your lights on. He paused, and the silence that followed was deafening. Then he delivered the final, devastating blow. That money wasn't just money. It was her trust. It was her faith in you, distilled into a number on a check. And you're sitting here, wearing it like a stolen coat, bragging to everyone about how you were smart enough to take it, a stolen coat. The metaphor hung in the air, so potent, so true, that it seemed to suck all the oxygen out of the night. In the midst of my agony, a tiny, defiant spark ignited. I was not alone in my outrage. Someone else saw. Someone else knew my worth. For a long, silent moment, I remained perfectly still on that porch, a statue carved from ice and disbelief. The cold had seeped so deep into my bones that I no longer felt it. The only sensation was a hollow, ringing void where my heart used to be. The muffins I had baked with such love felt like a box of ashes in my arm. The rare wine, a symbol of our beginning, now seemed like a bottle of poison. A storm of possibilities raged in my mind. I could follow my first instinct. I could throw the door open, my face streaked with frozen tears, and confront them all. I could scream and sob, shatter the bottle of wine on the floor, and fulfill Mark's prophecy of me being the emotional, predictable wife. I could give him the satisfaction of being right about me. I could let him see me broken. Or I could do something else. The thought came to me with a stunning, chilling clarity. His words, and Leo's, had not just broken my heart, they had handed me a key. A key to a cage I hadn't even realized I was in. The cage of being comfortable Clara, reliable Clara, the woman who tended her little garden while he conquered the world. He didn't see me. He saw a caricature, a role I had played so well for so long that I had started to believe it myself. But the woman standing on this porch was not that character. She was a stranger, even to me. Quietly, deliberately, I lowered my hand from the door. I took a step back, my boot making no sound in the soft snow. Then another. I turned around, my movements fluid and precise, all the frantic energy of my earlier excitement now channeled into a single, focused point of resolve. I walked down the porch steps, across the pristine blanket of white, and did not look back at the warm, golden light of the cabin. That light was a lie. The warmth was an illusion. I was stepping out of the fire and into the cold, clean air of the truth. As my car's engine turned over with a soft, respectful purr, it sounded to me like a roar of defiance in the vast, silent forest. I was no longer driving away from the city. I was driving toward myself. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere had curdled. Leo's words had landed like stones in a quiet pond, the ripples spreading out to touch everyone. The boisterous, carefree mood was gone, replaced by a thick, awkward silence. Mark stared into the fire, his jaw tight, a flush of anger and shame creeping up his neck. He felt cornered, exposed in front of his friends. He wanted to lash out, to call Leo a self-righteous hypocrite, but the truth in Leo's words had disarmed him. "What's with you, man?" Mark finally muttered, trying to reclaim some ground. He forced a laugh, but it sounded brittle. "It's just guys talking. You know how it is. Of course I love Clara. I was just blowing off some steam." Leo didn't back down. He picked up his jacket from the back of his chair, his movements calm and deliberate. He looked at Mark, his expression not of judgment, but of a deep, weary disappointment. "Do you?" he asked, his voice low and even. "Do you love her, or do you love what she provides for you? The stability. The unconditional support. The financial springboard that launched your entire career. There's a difference, Mark. You talk about her like she's a resource to be managed, not a person to be cherished. That's not love. It's consumption, David, ever the instigator, tried to intervene. Whoa, take it easy, Dr. Phil. It's a guy's weekend. We're supposed to complain about our wives. It's tradition. Leo just shook his head slowly, his eyes still locked on Mark. No, the tradition is to have each other's backs. And his back, his entire life, is held up by her. He should remember that before he talks about her like she's a disposable convenience. Without another word, Leo walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out into the cold night. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing the silence in the room. The fun was over. Mark felt a prickle of unease. He looked at the faces of his other friends, looking for solidarity, but they avoided his gaze, suddenly fascinated by their drinks or the patterns in the wooden floor. Leo's indictment hadn't just been for Mark, it had been for all of them who had laughed along. A seed of consequence had been planted, and in the suffocating quiet of the cabin, Mark had the unnerving feeling that it was already beginning to grow. I didn't drive home. The thought of returning to our house, a museum of our shared life, was unbearable. Every photograph, every piece of furniture, would feel like a prop in a play where I had been the unwitting lead actress. Instead, I followed the highway signs until I saw the harsh, buzzing glow of a 24-hour diner. It was a sterile, anonymous place, a refuge for the sleepless and the lost. I slid into a cracked vinyl booth, the air thick with the smell of stale coffee and disinfectant. The fluorescent lights overhead were unforgiving, stripping away all shadows, all illusions. I ordered a black coffee, and when the waitress set the thick ceramic mug in front of me, I wrapped my cold hands around it, seeking a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. I stared at my reflection in the dark, greasy window. The woman looking back at me was pale and tired, her eyes wide with a terrible, newfound knowledge. But she was not a victim. Her expression wasn't one of self-pity. It was one of stark, chilling awakening. The comfortable, predictable Clara was gone, vanished on that snowy porch. In her place was this woman, a stranger with a gaze as hard and clear as ice. I took out my phone. My fingers didn't tremble. I didn't scroll through my contacts to call my sister or my best friend for a tearful confession. The pain was too deep for sympathy. What I needed now was strategy. I found the number for a woman I knew from my old book club, a quiet but formidable lawyer who specialized in corporate and contract law. I left a calm, steady voicemail. Hi, Eleanor. It's Clara Bell. I hope you're well. I need to schedule a meeting with you as soon as possible to review the initial investment agreement for my husband's company, Innovate Solutions. It's a matter of some urgency. I ended the call, my voice never wavering. Then I opened my banking app. I navigated to the joint savings account, the one we had both contributed to, the one earmarked for a future he apparently planned to live without me. With a few precise taps, I transferred the majority of the balance, every penny that I had personally deposited, into a new account under my name alone. This wasn't an act of revenge. It wasn't about punishing him. It was an act of survival. It was about building a lifeboat. I was reclaiming what was mine, my money, my future, my self-respect. In the cold, artificial light of that diner, I finally understood. My worth wasn't something to be gifted to me by my husband. It was something I had to claim for myself. Mark returned home 2 days later, whistling as he dropped his duffel bag in the hall. He was expecting the familiar comfort of his routine, the smell of dinner cooking, the quiet hum of the house, his wife ready with a smile and a question about his trip. But the house was different. It was immaculate, but it felt sterile, staged. There were no welcoming aromas from the kitchen. It was utterly silent. He found me in the living room. I was sitting in the armchair he usually occupied, a place of authority in the room. I wasn't knitting or reading a book. I was simply waiting. On the coffee table in front of me was a single, crisp manila folder. My posture was straight, my hands were folded in my lap. I was not crying. My eyes, when they met his, were clear and steady. "Hello, Mark," I said. My voice was calm, a placid lake over a deep abyss. "We need to talk," he stopped, his cheerful facade faltering at the sight of this new, unfamiliar version of me. He tried to recover, to fall back on the charm that had always worked before. "Honey, what's all this?" He forced a laugh, stepping toward me with his arms open for a hug. God, I missed you. The trip was, well, it was a trip. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I simply raised a hand, a gesture that stopped him in his tracks. I heard you, Mark, I said, my voice cutting through his performance. At the cabin. I was on the porch. I came to surprise you. I watched the color drain from his face, leaving behind a pasty, slack-jawed shock. He opened and closed his mouth, but no sound came out. The charismatic dreamer was gone, replaced by a guilty child caught in a lie. Clara. It was just stupid talk, he stammered, his eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape. Guy talk. It didn't mean anything, it meant everything, I replied, my voice unwavering. I tapped the folder on the table. This is a copy of the investment agreement I signed 12 years ago. The one you told me was a formality. The one my grandmother's lawyer told me to be careful about. I'm having it reviewed. He stared at the folder as if it were a snake. But why? He whispered, his confusion now laced with fear. Because, I said, leaning forward slightly, it's not about what you said about me being an old pair of shoes, Mark. It's about what you truly believe. It's about you seeing my faith in you as a weakness to be exploited. And I can no longer be a silent partner, in business or in life, to someone who believes that the finality in my tone was absolute. He finally saw me. Not Clara, the comfortable wife. But Clara, the woman who had funded his entire world and was now calling in the dead of his respect. Later that evening, his phone rang. It was Leo. Mark, desperate for an ally, confessed everything. She knows, Leo. She was there. She heard it all. There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Leo's quiet voice replied. Good, he said, and hung up. The weeks that followed were not a whirlwind of dramatic fights or tearful reconciliations. They were a quiet, methodical dismantling of a life built on a faulty foundation. My meeting with Eleanor, the lawyer, was illuminating. The formality I had signed was vague, granting me no official equity or power, just as Mark had intended. But my canceled check, the wire transfer records, and Leo's willingness to testify to the verbal promises Mark had made gave us leverage. Faced with a protracted and embarrassing legal battle that would expose the very origins of his company, Mark conceded. I didn't want to destroy him. I wanted to be recognized. We drew up a new agreement. I became a full partner with a 30% equity stake in the company I had unknowingly founded and a voting seat on its board. He was forced, by law, to treat me as an equal. He had to present quarterly reports to me. He had to seek my approval for major expenditures. My signature was now required next to his. Our marriage, as we knew it, was over. But a new, strange, and formal partnership had begun. He had to look at me, truly look at me, not out of love, but out of necessity. He had to respect the woman he had dismissed because she now held a portion of his future in her hands. Months have passed. It is summer now. I am standing in my garden. The one he called little, the sun is warm on my skin, and the scent of blooming roses and rich earth fills the air. I have never felt more at home, more myself. I won, but it doesn't feel like a victory over him. It feels like a victory for me. I finally learned to listen to the quiet hum of my own strength, a sound I had ignored for far too long. So I ask you again, how well do you truly know the people you share your life with? But more importantly, how well do you know yourself? Never let another person's limited view of you become your reality. Your value is not measured by their applause or their appreciation. It is forged in your own quiet resilience, your own unwavering belief in the person you are and the person you are capable of becoming. Remind someone in your life today that you see them. Not the role they play, not the convenience they provide, but the true, complex, and brilliant person they are. Because sometimes, being truly seen is the one thing that can change everything.